The phone buzzed against the kitchen counter like a fading wasp, and that's when my perfectly ordinary Tuesday night went straight to hell. I'd been nursing a lukewarm beer and scrolling through work emails when Daphne's iPhone lit up with a message. She was upstairs in the shower, humming some pop song that made my teeth itch, and normally I wouldn't have given her phone a second glance, privacy and all that married couple bullshit. But the name on the screen made me freeze. Trevor. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My wife's ex-boyfriend. The same Trevor she'd dated for 3 years before we met. The same Trevor who sold used cars with the enthusiasm of an evangelical preacher and the morals of a loan shark. The same Trevor she claimed to have zero contact with for the past 8 years. The message preview was just visible enough to make my stomach drop. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same place as... I set my beer down carefully, like it was made of nitroglycerin. In our 12 years of marriage, Daphne had never mentioned talking to Trevor, not once. She'd always said he was ancient history, a mistake from her 20s that she'd rather forget. So why the hell was he texting her at 9:30 on a Tuesday night? The shower was still running upstairs. I could hear Daphne's voice echoing off the bathroom tiles, completely oblivious to the fact that her secret just landed in my lap like a live grenade. I picked up her phone. The thing about being married to someone for over a decade is that you learn their patterns. Daphne always used the same 4-digit passcode. Our wedding anniversary. She'd never been creative with security, which was ironic, considering she worked as an office manager for a pharmaceutical company that preached data protection like it was gospel. The phone unlocked on the first try. My hands weren't shaking yet. That would come later. Right now, I felt that cold, calculating calm that used to settle over me in the boxing ring back when I still had time for hobbies, back when I thought I knew my wife. I opened the message thread. Trevor. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same place as last week. I've been thinking about what you said. Last week. They'd met last week. I scrolled up, my thumb moving like it had a mind of its own. The conversation went back months. Months of deleted text that she'd apparently forgotten to clear from the cloud backup. Daphne. Colton's working late again. He won't even notice I'm gone. Trevor. His loss. You deserve better than being ignored. Daphne. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we'd never broken up. Trevor. We could find out. The shower shut off upstairs. I could hear the shower curtain rings scraping against the rod, the soft thud of Daphne stepping onto the bath mat. In about 3 minutes, she'd come downstairs in her terry cloth robe, kiss me on the forehead like the devoted wife she pretended to be, and ask about my day. I took screenshots. Every single message. Then I deleted the evidence of my snooping and placed her phone exactly where I'd found it. By the time Daphne appeared in the kitchen doorway, her dark hair wrapped in a towel and her face flushed from the hot water, I was back to scrolling through work emails like nothing had happened. How was your day, honey? She asked, padding over to the refrigerator in her bare feet. I looked up from my phone and smiled. It felt like my face might crack. Oh, you know, same old logistics coordination, moving freight from point A to point B, nothing as exciting as pharmaceutical management. She laughed, the same bright sound that had made me fall in love with her 13 years ago. Trust me, managing insurance authorizations isn't exactly thrilling. Any interesting meetings coming up? I asked, keeping my voice casual. Your calendar looked pretty busy this week. For just a split second, something flickered across her face. Guilt? Fear? Then it was gone, replaced by that practiced smile she wore like armor. Just the usual, boring office stuff. You know how it is. I nodded and took another sip of my beer. It tasted like ashes. Yeah, I know exactly how it is. She grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and headed back toward the stairs. I'm exhausted. Think I'll read for a bit and then call it a night. Don't stay up too late with work stuff, okay? Wouldn't dream of it, I said. As soon as I heard our bedroom door close, I pulled out my own phone and started making calls. The first was to Elena Holt, Trevor's wife. We'd met a few times at neighborhood barbecues and school events. She seemed sharp, no nonsense, the kind of woman who wouldn't appreciate being made a fool of. She answered on the third ring. Colton, is everything okay? It's kind of late. Elena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Has Trevor mentioned anything about meeting up with his ex-girlfriend? About rekindling old flames? The silence on the other end stretched long enough for me to wonder if the call had dropped. Which ex-girlfriend? She finally asked, her voice careful and cold. Daphne, my wife. Another pause. Then, Snake. Elena Holt turned out to be exactly the kind of ally I needed, smart, ruthless, and absolutely furious. We met the next morning at the Crowbar, a working-class dive bar that opened at 7 a.m. for the third-shift crowd. It wasn't the kind of place either of our spouses would ever think to look for us. The morning regulars were too focused on their coffee and whiskey to pay attention to two suburbanites plotting revenge in a corner booth. Show me everything, Elena said without preamble. I slid my phone across the scarred wooden table. She scrolled through the screenshots I'd taken, her expression growing darker with each message. That manipulative bastard, she muttered. Look at this one. You deserve better than being ignored. He's using the same lines he used on me when we were dating. Elena was a striking woman in her mid-30s, with auburn hair and the kind of sharp green eyes that missed nothing. She worked as a dental hygienist, which seemed fitting. She had the steady hands and attention to detail of someone who spent her days cleaning up other people's messes. How long have you suspected? I asked. Honestly? I didn't. Trevor's been working late a lot lately, but he owns the dealership. I figured it was just business. She looked up from my phone, her jaw tight. But now that I think about it, he's been different. Happier. More confident. I thought it was because sales were good. The bartender, a grizzled man named Murphy, who'd been pouring drinks at the Crowbar since the Carter administration, brought over 2 cups of coffee without being asked. He'd seen enough morning meetings like this to know the drill. So what's the plan? Elena asked, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. I want to catch them in the act. Get undeniable proof. But more than that, I want them to face consequences. Real consequences. Such as? I pulled out a small notebook where I'd been jotting down ideas since 3 a.m. when sleep had become impossible. Daphne works for Medcore Pharmaceuticals. They have strict policies about employee conduct and professional behavior. An affair, especially one that affects her work performance, could cost her the promotion she's been chasing for 2 years. Elena nodded slowly. And Trevor's dealership is actually owned by his uncle. Trevor just manages it. His uncle is old-school Catholic, very traditional. He wouldn't appreciate his nephew destroying 2 marriages. Exactly. But we need to be smart about this. No illegal stuff, nothing that could blow back on us. We document everything, we build an airtight case, and then we destroy them with their own choices. I like the way you think, Colton. We spent the next hour planning. Elena would start paying closer attention to Trevor's schedule, maybe even follow him to confirm the meetings. I would monitor Daphne's communications and behavior, building a timeline of the affair. But first, we needed to know where they were meeting. Same place as last week, Elena quoted from the text. Trevor used to take me to this little cafe called Grounds for Divorce when we were dating. Terrible name for a coffee shop, but he thought it was hilarious. It's about 20 minutes outside town, off Route 9. Perfect. Anonymous, but not too far for a lunch meeting. Elena finished her coffee and stood up. I have to get to work, but I'll text you Trevor's schedule as soon as I can get a look at his calendar. He keeps it on the kitchen counter like an idiot. Elena, I called as she reached for her coat. Why are you helping me? You could have just confronted Trevor directly. She turned back to me, and for a moment, her composed mask slipped. I saw the hurt underneath, the betrayal and anger that mirrored my own. Because I'm tired of being the wife who doesn't know what's going on in her own marriage, and because Trevor deserves to learn that actions have consequences. After Elena left, I sat in the booth for another 20 minutes, staring into my coffee and thinking. The old me, the guy who'd been happily married for 12 years, would have confronted Daphne directly, would have demanded an explanation, maybe suggested counseling, tried to save the marriage. But that guy had faded last night when I read those text messages. The man sitting in this dive bar at 8:30 on a Wednesday morning was someone else entirely. Someone who understood that sometimes the only way to win is to make sure the other side loses everything. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Trevor's calendar shows a lunch meeting today at noon. Grounds for Divorce Cafe on Route 9. Game on. I paid Murphy for the coffee and headed home to shower and change for work. Daphne was already gone, which wasn't unusual. She always left early to beat the traffic. But now I wondered if she was really going straight to the office, or if she had other stops to make. As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed Mrs. Kessler from next door watering her flowers and watching me with obvious curiosity. Margaret Kessler was the neighborhood's unofficial information network, a 70-year-old retired librarian who kept track of everyone's comings and goings like it was her job. "Morning, Colton," she called out. "You're leaving later than usual today." "Had an early meeting," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "You know how it is." "Oh yes, I certainly do. Daphne left quite early this morning too. She seemed in a hurry." I paused with my hand on the front door. "Did she?" "Around 6:30. I was surprised to see her car backing out so early. Usually she doesn't leave until 7:15. Very punctual, your wife. You can set your watch by her schedule." Except today. Today she'd left 45 minutes early. "Thanks, Mrs. Kessler. Have a good day." Inside the house, I went straight to our home office and fired up the computer. Daphne and I shared a family calendar through our Google accounts, something we'd set up years ago to coordinate our schedules and our son Jake's activities. I pulled up her calendar for today. It showed her usual work schedule, office from 8 to 5, no meetings noted. But when I checked the location history on our shared phone plan, I could see that her phone had pinged a cell tower near Trevor's dealership at 7:15 this morning. She'd lied about going straight to work. She'd stopped to see him first. I leaned back in my desk chair and smiled for the first time since this whole mess started. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the kind of expression that would have made my old boxing coach proud, the look I used to get right before I landed a knockout punch. "Game on," I said to the empty room. The next few days passed in a strange kind of suspended animation. I went through the motions of normal life, work, dinner, small talk about Jake's upcoming school play, while secretly building my case against my wife and her lover. Elena proved to be an invaluable partner in this endeavor. She had access to Trevor's home office, his calendar, even his credit card statements. What we discovered painted a picture of an affair that had been going on for nearly 6 months. "Look at this," Elena said, sliding a folder across the table during our second meeting at the Crowbar. "Credit card charges for lunch at Grounds for Divorce every Wednesday for the past month, and here's a charge for flowers from Peterson's florist on Valentine's Day." I opened the folder and felt my jaw clench. Peterson's was an expensive florist across town, not the kind of place Trevor would normally shop. And I remembered Valentine's Day clearly. Daphne had come home with a beautiful bouquet of white roses, claiming they were a spontaneous gift from her boss for handling a difficult client. "He's not even creative," I muttered. "Flowers for Valentine's Day? Really?" "Men like Trevor don't need to be creative," Elena replied, her voice bitter. "They just need to be available when someone else's wife is feeling neglected." I looked up at her. "Is that what happened with you and Trevor? Did he sweep you off your feet when you were vulnerable?" Elena's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Something like that. I was getting divorced from my first husband, feeling lost and stupid. Trevor was charming, attentive, everything my ex wasn't. It took me 3 years to realize that Trevor's version of attention is just another form of manipulation. But you married him anyway. I married him because I thought I could change him. Classic mistake. She took a sip of her coffee, which had gone cold while we'd been poring over the evidence. What about you and Daphne? How did you meet? College. She was a sophomore, I was a junior. She was smart, funny, ambitious, everything I thought I wanted in a partner. I closed the folder and pushed it back across the table. I guess people change. Or maybe they just stop pretending to be someone they're not. That afternoon, I decided to take a long lunch and drive out to grounds for divorce. It was exactly the kind of place I'd expected, a small, cozy cafe with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls, the kind of place that attracted couples looking for privacy and intimacy. I parked across the street and waited. At 12:15, Trevor's silver BMW pulled into the parking lot. He got out wearing an expensive suit and aviator sunglasses, looking like every middle-aged man's idea of what success should look like. 5 minutes later, Daphne's Honda Civic arrived. I watched my wife of 12 years walk across the parking lot to meet her ex-boyfriend, and I felt something cold and final settle in my chest. They didn't embrace when they met at the cafe entrance, but there was an intimacy in the way they stood close together, the way Trevor's hand briefly touched the small of her back as he held the door open for her. I sat in my car for another hour, taking pictures with my phone's zoom lens and making notes about the timeline. When they finally emerged from the cafe, they lingered by their cars for several minutes, talking in the kind of intense, quiet way that suggested they were making plans. That evening, Daphne came home in an unusually good mood. She hummed while she cooked dinner, asked about my day with genuine interest, and even suggested we watch a movie together after Jake went to bed. "You seem happy," I observed, as we settled onto the couch with a bowl of popcorn between us. "I had a good day at work. Sometimes everything just clicks, you know?" "I know exactly what you mean." She chose a romantic comedy from our streaming queue, something light and meaningless that we'd both forget by morning. But I found myself studying her profile in the flickering light from the television, looking for signs of guilt or deception. Instead, I saw a woman who looked more relaxed and content than she had in months. The affair wasn't destroying her. It was energizing her. She was getting something from Trevor that she wasn't getting from me, and rather than trying to fix our marriage, she'd decided to find it elsewhere. The realization should have hurt more than it did. Instead, it just made me angry. After Daphne went to bed, I retreated to the home office and opened my laptop. It was time to start phase 2 of the plan Elena and I had developed. I began with Daphne's workplace. Medcore Pharmaceuticals took their reputation seriously, especially after a scandal 5 years ago involving an executive who'd been embezzling funds. Their employee handbook was very clear about conduct that could reflect poorly on the company. I drafted an anonymous email to Daphne's supervisor, carefully worded to raise concerns without making specific accusations. I thought you should be aware that one of your office managers has been conducting personal business during work hours, including extended lunch meetings with individuals not associated with company business. This behavior has been observed multiple times and may be affecting her professional responsibilities. I didn't send it yet. That would come later, when the timing was right. Next, I researched Trevor's dealership. Holt Family Motors had been in business for 40 years, built by Trevor's uncle from a single lot into a small chain of 3 locations. The uncle, Robert Holt, was exactly what Elena had described: old school, traditional, and very protective of the family name. I found Robert's email address on the dealership's website and drafted another anonymous message. "I thought you should know that your nephew Trevor has been conducting inappropriate relationships with married women, using company time and resources to facilitate these meetings. This behavior reflects poorly on your family business and could expose you to liability issues. Again, I saved the draft without sending it. The beauty of this approach was its simplicity. I wasn't making false accusations or breaking any laws. I was simply ensuring that the right people became aware of behavior that was already happening. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Trevor just told me he has to work late tomorrow night. Inventory, he said. Want to bet he's meeting your wife instead? I typed back, let's find out. Can you track his location? Already on it. Find my friend's app. He doesn't know I can see where he is. Perfect. Tomorrow night, we spring the trap. I closed the laptop and headed upstairs. Daphne was already asleep, lying on her side with her back to my side of the bed. For a moment, I stood in the doorway looking at her, remembering all the nights I'd climbed into that bed, feeling grateful for the life we'd built together. Those days were over. Tomorrow night, I would begin the process of tearing down everything Daphne thought she could have: her marriage, her affair, and her carefully constructed double life. She wanted to play games? Fine. But she was about to learn that I was much better at this than she was. Thursday evening arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that usually made me appreciate living in Ohio. Tonight, it just felt like the calm before a storm. Daphne had texted me at 4 p.m. with a familiar excuse. Working late tonight. Don't wait up for dinner. Love you. The casual love you at the end made my teeth grind. She was getting bolder, more confident in her deception. That was going to be her downfall. Elena's text came 20 minutes later. Trevor's location shows he's at the Riverside Motel on Highway 6. They've upgraded from lunch dates. The Riverside Motel was a step down from the cozy cafe. It was the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. The fact that they'd moved their affair there told me everything I needed to know about how serious this had become. I picked up Jake from his after-school program and took him to my brother's house for the night. Dad has some work stuff to handle, I told him, hating myself for the lie but knowing it was necessary. By 7 p.m., I was sitting in the crowbar with Elena, both of us nursing beers and going over the plan one final time. You're sure about this? Elena asked. Once we do this, there's no going back. No pretending we don't know what we know. I'm sure. Are you? She nodded grimly. Trevor made his choice. Now he gets to live with the consequences. We drove separately to the motel. Elena parked at the gas station across the street while I pulled into the motel lot itself. Trevor's BMW was there, along with Daphne's Honda. Room 237, according to Elena's surveillance. I sat in my car for a few minutes, letting the reality of the situation sink in. My wife was in that room with another man, probably doing things she hadn't done with me in months. The betrayal was complete and undeniable, but instead of heartbreak, I felt something colder and more useful: determination. I got out of my car and walked to the motel office. The desk clerk was a tired-looking woman in her 50s who barely glanced up from her magazine when I approached. I think my wife might be in trouble, I said, putting on my best concerned husband act. Her car's in the lot, but she's not answering her phone. Could you check room 237 for me? I'm worried something might have happened. The clerk looked skeptical, but when I showed her my driver's license with our shared last name, she agreed to make a welfare check. Wait here, she said, grabbing a master key from behind the counter. I followed her outside, staying a few steps behind as she knocked on the door of room 237. Motel management, we need to check on the welfare of the guests in this room. The sounds from inside were immediate and frantic, muffled voices, footsteps, the rustle of clothing being hastily gathered. Just a minute, Daphne's voice called out, higher and more strained than usual. Open the door now, please, or I'll have to use my master key, the clerk called back. More scrambling sounds. Then the door opened to reveal Daphne in a hastily thrown-on dress, her hair disheveled and her face flushed. Behind her, I could see Trevor pulling on his shirt. The look on Daphne's face when she saw me standing behind the desk clerk was something I would remember for the rest of my life. Pure terror mixed with guilt, and the dawning realization that her carefully constructed lie had just collapsed. "Colton," she whispered, "I can explain." "Can you?" I asked, keeping my voice calm and level. "Because I'd love to hear this explanation." Trevor appeared in the doorway, trying to project confidence, but failing miserably. "Look, man, this isn't what it looks like." I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Really? Because it looks like my wife is having an affair with her ex-boyfriend in a cheap motel room. What am I missing?" The desk clerk, clearly uncomfortable with the domestic drama unfolding in front of her, backed away toward the office. "I'll just leave you folks to work this out." "There's nothing to work out," I said, pulling out my phone. "Elena, you can come over now. They're both here." Daphne's eyes widened. "Elena, Trevor's wife, what does she have to do with this?" "Everything," Elena's voice said from behind me. She'd crossed the parking lot and now stood beside me, her face a mask of cold fury. "Hello, Trevor. Working late tonight?" Trevor's face went pale. "Elena, I can explain." "No," she cut him off. "You really can't. Because Colton and I have been documenting your little affair for the past week. We have photos, credit card records, text messages, and now this." She held up her phone, which had been recording video since she'd arrived. "You're both pathetic," Elena continued, her voice growing stronger. "Sneaking around like teenagers, lying to the people who trusted you. Did you think we were too stupid to figure it out?" Daphne stepped forward, tears starting to form in her eyes. "Colton, please, let me explain. This isn't... It's not what you think." "Then what is it, Daphne? What exactly is it when a married woman spends 6 months lying to her husband so she can have closeness with her ex-boyfriend in motel rooms?" The words hit her like physical blows. She flinched with each one, and I found myself feeling nothing at all. No satisfaction, no pain, just a cold emptiness where my love for her used to be. "I never meant for this to happen," she said weakly. "But it did happen, over and over again, every Wednesday for a month, plus God knows how many other times." I looked at Trevor, who was trying to edge back into the motel room. "And you're not even man enough to own what you've done." "Look, Colton, I'm sorry, okay? It just happened. We ran into each other at the grocery store, started talking, and—" "Save it," I interrupted. "I don't care how it started. I only care how it ends." Elena stepped closer to Trevor, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than shouting would have. "It ends with you losing everything, Trevor. Your wife, your house, your job, your reputation, everything." "You can't do that," he protested. "You can't just—" "Watch us," I said. I turned back to Daphne, who was now crying openly. "I'll be filing for divorce tomorrow morning. Jake will stay with me. You can find somewhere else to live. You can't take my son away from me." "I can, and I will. Because unlike you, I actually put his welfare first. He doesn't need to see his mother destroying our family." I started walking back toward my car, then stopped and turned around one more time. "Oh, and Daphne, you might want to start looking for a new job. Your boss is going to receive some very interesting information about your conduct during work hours." The last thing I saw as I drove away was the two of them standing in that motel parking lot, looking lost and broken, and finally understanding that their actions had consequences. It was the most satisfied I'd felt in months. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and the systematic destruction of 2 marriages. Elena moved fast. By the following Monday, she'd filed for divorce and frozen all joint accounts. Trevor came home from work to find the locks changed and his belongings in boxes on the front lawn. She'd also sent copies of our evidence to his Uncle Robert, along with a detailed timeline of how Trevor had been using company resources to facilitate his affair. Robert Holt's response was swift and brutal. Trevor found himself demoted from manager to salesman, with a significant pay cut and a warning that any further inappropriate conduct would result in termination. Family business means family values, Robert had told Elena when she called to thank him. Trevor forgot that. Now he'll remember. My approach with Daphne was more methodical. I'd moved her belongings to the guest room the night after the motel confrontation, and she'd been sleeping there ever since, trying desperately to convince me to give her another chance. It was a mistake, she'd pleaded over breakfast that Saturday. A stupid, selfish mistake, but it's over now. I'll never see him again. You're right, I'd replied, not looking up from my coffee. It is over. The divorce papers were served on Monday. Daphne's reaction was everything I'd hoped for: shock, denial, anger, and finally a kind of desperate panic as she realized I was serious. You can't do this, Colton. We have a son together. We have a history. We had a history. You threw it away for cheap thrills with your ex-boyfriend. The custody arrangements were particularly satisfying. My lawyer had built a case around Daphne's deception and poor judgment, arguing that her willingness to lie and sneak around made her an unfit primary guardian. The judge agreed to temporary custody in my favor, with Daphne getting supervised visitation until a full hearing could be scheduled. But the real masterpiece was what happened at Daphne's job. The anonymous email I'd sent to her supervisor had prompted an internal investigation. When HR reviewed her computer logs and phone records, they discovered a pattern of personal calls and extended lunch breaks that coincided exactly with her affair timeline. MedCor's response was swift and unforgiving. Daphne was called into a disciplinary meeting on Wednesday morning and terminated for conduct unbecoming of a company representative and misuse of company time and resources. She came home that afternoon looking shell-shocked, her face pale and her hands shaking. They fired me, she said, standing in the doorway of the living room where I was helping Jake with his homework. I heard, I replied without looking up. Mrs. Kessler mentioned she saw you come home early. You don't understand. I've been there for 8 years. That job was my career. And Trevor was your ex-boyfriend. You made choices, Daphne. These are the consequences. Jake looked up from his math worksheet, sensing the tension. Is Mom okay? Mom's fine, buddy. She's just having a tough day at work. Why don't you finish your homework in your room? After Jake left, Daphne collapsed onto the couch, her composure finally cracking completely. How could you do this to me? I'm the mother of your child. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I closed my laptop and looked at her directly for the first time in days. It meant everything to me. That's why this hurts so much. Then why are you destroying my life? I'm not destroying anything, Daphne. I'm just making sure everyone knows who you really are. Your boss, your coworkers, our neighbors, our friends. They all deserve to know that the woman they trusted is a liar and a cheat. You're being cruel. I'm being honest. For the first time in months, someone in this family is being completely honest. That weekend, Elena and I met at the Crowbar to compare notes on our respective divorces. She looked tired but determined, like someone who'd been through a war and come out victorious. Trevor's been calling me nonstop, she said, sliding into our usual booth. Begging me to reconsider, promising to change the whole routine. And I told him that ship sailed when he decided to start screwing married women in motel rooms. She took a long sip of her beer. What about Daphne? Same thing, different words. She keeps insisting it was a mistake, that she never meant to hurt me, as if the intention matters more than the action. Do you think they'll end up together? Trevor and Daphne? I considered the question. Maybe. But it won't last. People who cheat with you will cheat on you. They'll figure that out eventually. Elena nodded. Or maybe they deserve each other. Two selfish people making each other miserable. Either way, it's not our problem anymore. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the afternoon regulars filter in for their usual drinks. Murphy nodded at us from behind the bar, and I realized that this place had become a refuge during the worst period of my life. "Any regrets?" Elena asked eventually. "About the divorce?" "No." "About how we handled it?" I paused, thinking. "No regrets there either. They made their choices. We just made sure those choices had real consequences." "Good, because I have one more surprise for them." She pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot of a Facebook post. It was from a local neighborhood group that both our families belonged to, the kind of social media page where people shared recommendations for contractors and complained about traffic. The post was simple and devastating. "Ladies, be careful about leaving your husbands alone with Trevor Holt from Holt Family Motors. He has a history of pursuing married women and breaking up families. Ask Elena Holt and Colton Reyes if you don't believe me." The post had been up for 6 hours and already had 43 comments and 27 shares. "Elena," I said, genuinely impressed. "That's brilliant. I figured the community should know what kind of man they're dealing with. Public service announcement." I scrolled through the comments, which ranged from supportive, "so sorry you're going through this," to vindictive, "I always thought that guy was sleazy," to curious, "Wait, what happened?" "Daphne's going to see this," I said. "I'm counting on it. Let her explain to her friends and family why her name is attached to a cheating scandal." My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Daphne. "Did you see what Elena posted on Facebook? This is harassment. Make her take it down." I showed the message to Elena, who laughed out loud. "Tell her to call a lawyer," Elena suggested. "Oh wait, she can't afford one anymore since she got fired." I typed back, "Elena can post whatever she wants. It's called free speech. Maybe you should have thought about public embarrassment before you started sleeping with other people's husbands." The response came immediately. "I hate you." "Good," I said to Elena. "Hate is honest. It's the first honest emotion she's shown me in months." That night, I tucked Jake into bed and read him a story about a brave knight who defeated a dragon. It was one of his favorites, a simple tale of good triumphing over evil through courage and determination. "Dad," Jake said as I was turning off his light, "why has Mom been so sad lately?" I sat back down on the edge of his bed. "Sometimes adults make mistakes, buddy. Big mistakes that hurt the people they love. Mom made one of those mistakes. Are you going to forgive her?" The question hit me harder than I'd expected. Some mistakes are too big to forgive, Jake, but that doesn't mean I don't want her to be okay. I just can't be married to her anymore. Will I still get to see her? Of course. She's still your mom, and she loves you very much. That part will never change. After Jake fell asleep, I went downstairs and found Daphne sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open, staring at Elena's Facebook post. 37 shares now, she said without looking up. Everyone we know has seen this. Everyone we know was going to find out eventually. This just speeds up the process. Our son is going to see this someday. His friends, his teachers, everyone will know what I did. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt a flicker of sympathy for her, but it passed quickly. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you did it. She closed the laptop and looked at me with red, swollen eyes. I know you'll never forgive me. I know our marriage is over, but please, Colton, don't let your anger destroy me completely. I'm still Jake's mother. I'm still a human being. I studied her face, looking for signs of the woman I'd fallen in love with 13 years ago. She was still there, somewhere underneath the guilt and shame and desperation. But she was also a stranger now, someone who'd proven herself capable of months of calculated deception. I'm not trying to destroy you, Daphne. I'm just making sure you face the same consequences that anyone else would face for doing what you did. No special treatment because we were married. No free passes because we have a child together. And after that? After the divorce is final and everyone knows what I did? What then? I stood up and headed toward the stairs. Then you figure out how to live with the choices you made, just like the rest of us. As I reached the doorway, I turned back one last time. For what it's worth, I hope you do figure it out. Jake deserves a mother who learns from her mistakes instead of just making excuses for them. It was the last real conversation we ever had. 3 months later, I was sitting in my lawyer's office signing the final divorce papers when my phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Turn on Channel 7 News. You're going to love this." I excused myself and stepped into the hallway to call her. "What's going on?" "Trevor got arrested this morning. Fraud charges. Apparently, he's been selling cars with rolled-back odometers and forging inspection certificates. The state attorney general's office raided the dealership an hour ago." I felt a slow smile spread across my face. "No kidding." "Gets better. His Uncle Robert is claiming he had no knowledge of Trevor's illegal activities and is cooperating fully with the investigation. Trevor's been fired and they're pursuing civil charges to recover damages." "What about criminal charges?" "Felony fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. His lawyer thinks he's looking at 2 to 5 years if he's convicted." I walked back into the lawyer's office and signed the last of the divorce documents with a much lighter heart than I'd had when I arrived. "Congratulations, Mr. Reyes," my lawyer said, shaking my hand. "You're officially a free man." "Thank you. And the custody arrangement?" "Full custody to you, with supervised visitation for your ex-wife. The judge was very clear that her pattern of deception and poor judgment made her an unsuitable primary guardian." That evening, I picked Jake up from school and took him out for pizza to celebrate. Not the divorce, obviously, but the end of a difficult chapter in our lives. "Dad," he said, working his way through a slice of pepperoni pizza, "Tommy's mom asked me if it was true that Mom had a boyfriend." I set down my own slice and looked at him carefully. "What did you tell her?" I said I didn't know. "But is it true?" Jake was 10 years old enough to understand the basics of what had happened, but young enough that I could still protect him from the worst details. "Yes, it's true. That's why Mom and I got divorced. Sometimes adults make choices that hurt their families." "Is that why Mom doesn't live with us anymore?" "That's part of it. Mom needs some time to figure out how to make better choices." Jake nodded solemnly. "Will she figure it out?" "I hope so, buddy. For your sake, I really hope so." We finished our pizza and drove home through the quiet suburban streets that had been the backdrop for my entire adult life. Everything looked the same, but I felt like a completely different person than the man who discovered those text messages 6 months ago. That night, after Jake went to bed, I sat in my home office and opened my laptop. There was an email waiting from Elena with the subject line, "The Final Chapter." "Colton," it read, "I thought you should know that Daphne came to see me today. She wanted to apologize for her part in destroying both our marriages. She seemed genuinely remorseful, but also completely lost. She's been living with her sister since the divorce and working part-time at a retail job. She asked if I thought you would ever consider letting her see Jake without supervision. I told her that was between you and her, but that she'd have to prove she'd changed before anyone would trust her again. I also told her that Trevor was facing prison time and that their relationship was over. She seemed surprised by that, like she'd been expecting him to stand by her through all this. Some people never learn. Anyway, I wanted you to know that she's not doing well, in case that matters to you. Take care, Elena." I read the email twice, then closed the laptop without responding. Daphne's current situation wasn't my problem anymore. She'd made her choices and now she was living with the consequences. But as I got ready for bed, I found myself thinking about the woman I'd married 13 years ago. The ambitious, funny, intelligent woman who'd seemed like the perfect partner for building a life together. Where had that woman gone? When had she been replaced by someone who could lie so easily and hurt so carelessly? Maybe she'd always been capable of this, and I'd just been too naive to see it. Or maybe people really did change, becoming strangers to themselves and everyone who loved them. Either way, it didn't matter now. The next morning, I woke up to find Jake in the kitchen making cereal for breakfast, something he'd learned to do during the chaos of the divorce proceedings. "Morning, Dad," he said, looking up from his bowl of Cheerios. "Morning, buddy. Sleep okay?" "Yeah. I had a dream about Mom. She was happy again, like she used to be." I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down across from him. "That sounds like a nice dream. Do you think she'll ever be happy again?" It was the kind of question that didn't have a simple answer, but Jake deserved honesty. "I think she can be, if she learns from what happened and makes better choices going forward. But that's up to her, not us." "I miss her," Jake said quietly. "I know you do. And that's okay. She's still your mom, and it's normal to miss her." "Do you miss her?" I considered the question carefully. I miss the person I thought she was, but I don't miss being lied to and betrayed. Does that make sense? Jake nodded. "I think so." After I dropped Jake off at school, I drove past the old house where Elena and Trevor used to live. There was a "for sale" sign in the front yard, and Elena's car was gone from the driveway. She'd mentioned that she was moving to a different part of town, starting fresh somewhere that didn't have memories of her failed marriage around every corner. I understood the impulse, but I decided to stay put. This was Jake's neighborhood, his school district, his normal life. He'd already lost enough stability. Besides, I wasn't running from anything anymore. I'd faced the worst thing I could imagine, the complete betrayal of someone I'd trusted with my life, and I'd survived it. More than survived it. I'd won. That afternoon, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer it, but something made me pick up. "Colton? It's Daphne." I hadn't heard her voice in 2 months. She sounded tired, older somehow. "What do you want, Daphne?" I wanted to apologize, really apologize. Not just say I'm sorry because I got caught. I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I need to say it. I pulled over to the side of the road. "I'm listening." I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was selfish and stupid and thought I could have everything without consequences. I hurt you, I hurt Jake, I hurt Elena, I even hurt myself. And for what? For a few months with someone who turned out to be a criminal? Trevor got arrested. I know, fraud charges. His lawyer says he'll probably go to prison. Her voice broke slightly. I threw away my family for someone who was stealing from his own uncle. "I'm sorry you're hurting, Daphne, but I can't fix this for you." "I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking, do you think there's any chance you'll ever let me see Jake without supervision? He's my son, too." I thought about Jake's question that morning, about whether his mother would ever be happy again, and I thought about the woman I'd married, who'd been capable of better than this. "Prove that you've changed," I said finally. "Get counseling, get a stable job. Show me that you can be trusted to put Jake's welfare ahead of your own wants. Do that consistently for 6 months and we'll talk." "Really? Really. But Daphne, this is your last chance. If you mess this up, if you hurt Jake or lie to him or use him to get back at me, I'll make sure you never see him again. Do you understand?" "I understand. And Colton, thank you for giving me a chance to earn back the right to be his mother." After she hung up, I sat in my car for a long time, thinking about second chances and whether people could really change. I didn't know the answer, but I was willing to find out, for Jake's sake, if not for hers. 6 months later, Daphne had completed a year of counseling, found a steady job as an office manager for a small accounting firm, and moved into her own apartment. She'd also started dating someone new, a divorced father of 2 who seemed stable and kind. I'd gradually increased her visitation time with Jake, and she'd proven herself reliable and focused on his needs rather than her own. She was becoming the mother he deserved, even if she'd never again be the wife I'd thought I married. Trevor, meanwhile, had been convicted on 3 felony counts and sentenced to 4 years in prison. His uncle had sold the dealership rather than deal with the scandal, and Elena had moved to a different state to start over completely. As for me, I'd started dating again, a teacher at Jake's school who understood the complexities of co-parenting and shared custody. She was nothing like Daphne, which was exactly what I needed. One evening, as I was helping Jake with his homework, he looked up from his science project and said, "Dad, I'm glad you and Mom aren't married anymore." The comment surprised me. "Why's that, buddy?" "Because now you're both happier. And when you're happy, I'm happy." I ruffled his hair and smiled. That's very wise for a 10-year-old. "I learned it from you. You taught me that people have to face consequences for their choices, but they can also choose to do better next time." Looking at my son, I realized that despite everything we'd been through, the betrayal, the divorce, the public humiliation, the legal battles, we'd come through it stronger and more honest than before. Daphne had gotten her second chance, and she was making the most of it. Trevor had gotten the consequences his actions deserved. Elena had gotten her freedom and a fresh start. And I'd gotten the most important thing of all, the knowledge that I could survive anything, as long as I was willing to fight for what mattered most. Justice wasn't always pretty, but it was always worth it.